First, I would like to express my gratitude for your continuing support and for liking and sharing our posts, and that is much appreciated. We hope you will continue. There is a huge job to be done. The need is actually obvious. So many things. For example, we have made big promises to our First Nations people, and we should fulfill them, but we haven't got the money. And we mustn't let them down again after so many times of making promises and then ignoring them. And the same is true with the medical situation. We haven't got the money necessary to do the things that we should be doing. We should be shortening the lengths of time, for example, in emergency places from 6 hours to some minutes. It just isn't fair that people should have to wait 6 hours for attention. And then we should reduce elective surgery, sometimes by weeks or months or even years. And the same applies in education. I just read in the paper last week where they were reducing the number of teachers for students with special needs. Well, this is just the opposite to what it should be. We should be having more teachers for students with special needs, because otherwise we're moving backwards instead of forwards. And of course, there's that infrastructure need. We should be reducing the number of lead pipes that are still in the ground and taking out the old concrete water pipes in Toronto so that they don't break in the winter when it gets cold and slow or stop traffic. Not to mention, of course, enabling us to get around more quickly and to build new trains and subways and all of the things necessary for a modern society to move so that we're not stuck in a gridlock and we're not having to line up for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes for the next bus to come along. And all of this is not necessary, and it wasn't always so. In fact, if you go back to 1939, from 1939 to 1974, the Government of Canada was able to do all of the things that were necessary, and without going into a lot of debt. The Bank of Canada provided the Government of Canada with very large sums of near zero cost money. And that's what we used to get out of the Great Depression, to help finance World War II, and then after the war, to build our infrastructure. The Trans-Canada Highway, the Great St. Lawrence Seaway, and the Dew Line. Some of you have probably never heard of the Dew Line, but the Dew Line was the distant early warning line to let us know if Russian bombers were coming across the North Pole in our direction. It went right around the country. It was huge and it was expensive, but it was something that we were able to do at that time, in addition to establishing our Social Security system, which was one of the best in the world. All of this we did without incurring any significant debt. As a matter of fact, from 1867 until 1974, we did all of these things, including fighting 2 world wars, and only had accumulated 21.6 billion debt. And everything changed. Why? Because the Bank of Canada unilaterally and without any concurrence on the part of the Government of Canada changed the rules. And instead of providing the government with zero-cost money, we had to borrow it in the market at market rates. And that's where everything began to fall apart. We had to borrow, for example, during the recession of 81-82, at over 20%. And at that rate, the debt doubles every 4 years. And during the time since, we have accumulated $615 billion in debt, and it's headed towards 700 at the end of the next 4 years. On the debt so far, we have paid $1.1 trillion in interest. Can you believe that was enough money to meet the needs, the backlog in all of these areas that I mentioned and more? In other words, to do the job that was to be done. But instead of having the money to do the job that should have been done, we spent it on interest and turned the money over to the elite rich, which was just exactly the wrong way to go. So obviously, we have to change the system. We have to end the bankers' monopoly to create money, and we have to get governments back in the business of creating debt-free money for the use of the people. And our group has proposed to the Government of Canada a new social contract between the government and people of Canada, which would do two things. First of all, in the short run, 7 years, it would provide huge amounts of money, which would enable us to catch up in all these areas of need that I outlined and more. And secondly, after the 7 years, would split the money creation function with the chartered banks, 34% to 66%. And that would allow governments at all levels, federal, provincial, municipal, to do their jobs and to do them with probably lower taxes that we have at the present time and without deficits ever again. And the banks would still have enough money creation power to do their job, which is basically to provide a little temporary financing to new businesses and to make personal loans in cases of emergency and that sort of thing. So this is what is possible. We can revolutionize the system and ultimately revolutionize the world to one that is just instead of unfair. So we ask you to sign our petition and help us meet our first high initial goal of 10,000. But that isn't the end. It won't be the end. It will be just one step. And after that, we'll have to keep on going and fighting hard and making sure that the message gets through to the government and keep putting on the pressure and keep adding things to the mix to make sure that we win the battle and that we come out on top, that the government sees the light, accepts the proposition, and that Canada becomes a great, prosperous, wonderful country once again. It is possible, but only if we make it happen. And that is our job.